right, turn to Judges chapter 11. Judges chapter 11. Well, I want to kind of skim over 10 just a tiny bit, but I'm going to be focused more on chapter 11 this evening. But the book of Judges really is continuing, and so does the record of the Israelites' downward spiral. And you have that same pattern, turning from God, facing conquest, crying out to God, being delivered, repeated here in chapter 10 and chapter 11 as well. Following the death of Abimelech, Israel is led by two other judges. We don't know much about them. Some small details. We know both of them judged a little over 20 years each. But then the sons of Israel in verse 6 of chapter 10 again did evil in the sight of the Lord. And predictably, as the Israelites began to serve the gods of their neighbors, God becomes angry with them. And he hands them over to the Philistines and to the Ammonites as well. And just as predictable, their anguish turns them back to God, and they cry out to God. But what does God do differently this time? He tells them, cry out to your gods and let them save you. He's getting tired of it, isn't he? It's repetitious. They keep falling away. Well, they cry out to him. They put away their other gods. They repent, and God has compassion for their misery. Yeah, I think that's in verse 16. He could bear their misery of Israel no longer. And so the next time the Ammonites assembled their army in Gilead, Israel was ready for battle. They gathered there at Mizpah. They were ready to fight their oppressors of 18 years. And except for one detail, they were missing one important part to their army. What was it? They needed someone to lead them. So what did they do? They started asking around, hey, who wants to lead us? Whoever wants to lead our army, we'll let them lead all of Gilead as well. You can rule over us. And how many volunteers did they get in their home city area? None. That's interesting to me. So why wouldn't anyone take them up on that offer? If you lead this army, you will become pretty much a king of our area. That's what they're pretty much asking for, right? So why would no one take them up on that offer? Didn't think they were going to win. So they decide, well, let's go to Jephthah. You all remember Jephthah? Let's go to Jephthah. He's up north about 50 miles. So they send the elders up there to talk to him. Now, what do we know about Jephthah? If you read through the chapter, what do we remember or know about good old Jephthah? His mother was a harlot. What did his brothers think of him? Yeah, you're going to have no part of this inheritance. Get out. And so he went north, and what did he find there? Riffraff, marauders. New American Standard says some worthless fellas, and he stayed there in Tob. How do you say that? Tob, T-O-B. I was looking at it, wondering, Tob, whatever that's supposed to be. Huh? What's that? Just like job. Then I'm going to say Tob. And so they go up there, these elders, they go there, they're looking for a leader, and they make the same offer to him. I think that's verse 7. No, verse 6. Come and be our chief that we may fight against the sons of Ammon. Then Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, did you not hate me and drive me from my father's house? So why have you come to me now when you are in trouble? What remember, we're talking about emotions on Sunday night. What emotion is he expressing here? Bitterness. He's bitter. He is bitter, and you can't really blame him. I mean, man, they didn't treat him well at all. And so they tell him the reason there in verse 8, that you may go with us and fight with the sons of Ammon and become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. And then he asks them, what did you just say? He makes them repeat it. Yes, you will lead over the whole area, the whole city. And so he takes the job, doesn't he? He comes on down.
Just to point out, verse 1, he's a valiant warrior. So it's not like he's...
Well, yeah,
He didn't ask a baker to lead him.
No, that's not just anybody. There's a reason they went up to him. He knows war. He's been up there engaged in this. They know that, so he's got a reputation. And so they're inviting him back. And you can lead over us. So he goes. Now he is able, he's a valiant warrior, willing to be a soldier, but he preferred to settle disputes with the Ammonites with negotiations, doesn't he? What's the first thing he does when he goes and takes over the army? He sends a messenger with a letter to them. He wants to, well, let's not do this, pretty much. And they write back, oh, we want that land because it's our land, the Ammonites. So he writes a lengthy letter back, and he details exactly what happened as Israel came up, how the Lord was with them. The Lord gave them the land, but who did they take the land from? See, the Ammonites had the same problem I had last week. I think it was last week, because I kept saying Amorites, but it's Ammonites, because they were saying it was their land, but the land they got it from was actually the Amorites and not Ammonites. Did you see the difference? So what? Putin? Oh, Valdemir? Oh, whatever that guy's name is. Well, yeah, I guess. But here, he's really at the negotiating table. And as it comes down to verses 15 down to verse 27, I think it is. Yep, 27. And the Ammonites, they reject the letter, and so they're going to go to war. So the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Jephthah there in verse 29. He passes through Gilead and Manasseh. He passed through Mizpah and Gilead, and from there he goes on to the sons of Ammon, and he makes what we call the tragic vow. The New American Standard has that title. He makes a tragic vow. Verse 30. He vowed to the Lord, saying, if you will indeed give the sons of Ammon into my hand, then it shall be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. I checked the Hebrew. It's there. Burnt offering. That's what his vow is. Now, as we already discussed at Pew Packers, was that a good idea? Why did he do this? Well, think about the situation and what they're doing. Do you think he is excited? Maybe the adrenaline's flowing. He's got an army. He's leading it. If he wins this battle, he's going to get to be the leader over the land that kicked him out. And over his brothers who didn't like him. He weren't going to get any inheritance, but he's going to get the whole land now. So I think he's a little excited. And when you get excited, when you're all pumped up, you don't think straight. And he made a vow. And he did not think it through. And so he goes on to battle, and he wins. So he becomes the military hero. He's just been proclaimed ruler of Gilead. It should have been the best day of his life. He is going to go home. He's going to celebrate. And as he's coming home, first thing that comes out of his door, his daughter. And why wouldn't it be? If that were his wife, to come out and celebrate. And his best day of his life just turned into the worst day of his life, didn't it? And of course, he explains to her what he had said and that he cannot take it back. She says, my father, you have given your word, verse 36, to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, since the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the sons of Ammon. She said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone 2 months that I may go to the mountains and weep because of my virginity, I and my companions. Then he said, go. So he sent her away for 2 months, and she left with her companions and wept on the mountains because of her virginity. At the end of the 2 months, she returned to her father, who did to her according to the vow which he had made. And she had no relations with a man. Thus it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went yearly to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in the year. Now, some commentators say that he did not offer her up as a burnt offering. What do they say? Anybody know what some folks will say about this to try to? They say that he gives her over to service in the temple. They don't want to say that he gave her over as a burnt offering. That's horrific. He said he would do it. The text tells us he did all that he vowed. And then it was such a horrible thing that happened. Israel remembered her in a ritual of doing this for their own daughters to go away in remembrance of her. If she just went to go work at the temple for the rest of her life, would they set a thing, have a tradition of their own daughters going in remembrance of this every year? Well, there's various jobs I think they could do. I don't know, but I didn't dive deep into what some of the commentators say, but actually, I take that back. I think I do have that written down here somewhere. Give me a second. Samuel was given over, but yes. A perpetual service. Perpetual service in some. I guess I shouldn't have said temple, but that he committed her to some type of perpetual service. But that's not what I read, and especially that's not how Israel seems to be reacting to what happened here. I think he did it. Now, before we get into what he could have done, I want to ask you to briefly or give me a synopsis of the parable of the prodigal son. A man had how many sons? 2 sons. And the youngest, what happened with him? Inheritance. And what did he want to do with that? Leave, right? And then he goes off to pagans, to worthless fellows who are not part of God's children, it seems, and he squanders it. Famine comes. And what happens? Living with pigs. But he comes to his senses, and he comes back finding his father doing what? Waiting for him, looking for him. And he's accepted back. And things get better for him. See, I think that story and the story of Jephthah, we can learn. So there's some parallels here. They both tell of young men who had unnamed mothers, faced inheritance issues. They left home, lived with immoral people. They were in a distant land. In both cases, the young men went home to face an uncertain future, but ended up celebrating with the whole community. However, it's the differences, even though you see a lot of similarities, it's the differences that are striking. One had a father that was ambiguous. That's going to be Jephthah. The other had a father who was waiting for him. One drifted further into dysfunction, and while the other repented. In the sense of Jephthah and the prodigal son, it represents opposite ends of the spectrum of faith. A significant common thread in both these stories is the importance of family and community. Jephthah is a child from a troubled home, right? He's a young person. He had a little community support, but in the end, the prodigal son was welcomed and embraced home. Jephthah's story reveals that God is present with him, but did people of Gilead really accept him? Did the people of that whole area accept him? No, they don't. We'll find that out also over in chapter 12. His brothers, they didn't want him, and things didn't really pan out great for him in the long run, does it? How did the people of Gilead view Jephthah? In the beginning, how did they view him? Outcast. Kick him out. He was a son of a harlot. Don't want him. But then, oh man, we need someone to lead our army. Well, we're going to go get Jephthah. Did they really like Jephthah? They're just using him because he is of use to them. And he knew that. Now here's where it gets interesting. Let's go now to the tragic vow. Could he have gotten out of that vow? Before you answer that, actually, I should have done this first. Numbers chapter 30, verse 2. If a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word. he shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. Was there any way for him to get out of that vow? You shake your head, no, but it's not true. Leviticus chapter 27, the whole chapter outlines what you can do if you cannot fulfill a vow. It doesn't say in that many words, but it is speaking of vows, and it talks about weighing, based on the age of a person and who they are, their gender, how much money they can pay to get out of a vow, or to have an offering to get out of a vow. Now, Jephthah clearly did not know about this. Who did? Someone. Do you think people didn't know about what was happening? Remember, how many months, Caleb, did she go to the mountains? 2 months. And then he made the vow while he was going to war. They knew about it. They heard about what had happened. Go ahead, Jim.
Israel forgot the law.
Oh, yeah, they did. But if you got a leader, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But he knew a lot of the history.
He sure did.
So part of me says, well, they could have forgotten it because they weren't being taught. But it was being taught something because he knew about the Exodus and how they got into the Promised Land, which.
A Levitical priest somewhere had to think, a vow. Boy, you know what? I read about that. Maybe a little bit of research. Something he could have gotten out of it. Or maybe somebody could have came to him and given him some counsel on this. Did they? No, that's against the law. What he did was absolutely wrong. So why did he do it? Because that's right. This is what I vowed, and I'm going to do it. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. He didn't stop and think, maybe I should go and check the law on this. Maybe should inquire of the Lord on this and discuss these things. Like you said, he definitely knew things. He recognized God was with Israel. But how often do we see Jephthah going to the Lord?
He knew God was with him.
Well,
More specifically, he knew God was with him.
he seemed to.
Spirit came upon him.
That's true. But did he ever inquire of the Lord that we know of? I mean, generally we get that from.
Don't inquire of the Lord. We read about it. So.
Generally we get that from these judges. We don't see him doing that. In fact, he seems to just be spouting things out without thinking it through. But we see a community here who's not really, I think, supporting him. If you heard someone make a vow like that and they were going to go through with it, would you go and talk to them? Think about Jephthah and think about the prodigal son. The prodigal son repented and came home, right? Jephthah, he seems to be a little more dysfunctional, I would say. Who would you rather have in the congregation? That's true. Who would you rather have in the congregation? Jephthah or the prodigal son? Yeah. Larry, you are on fire today.
There was another way that he could have released himself from the vow.
Okay.
He could have taken his own life rather than sacrifice the life of his daughter.
Okay. Fallen on his own sword.
From his vow.
That would have
It
looked.
wouldn't have helped him much, but he would have released him from his vow.
That tells you where his daughter stood on the
That's right.
podium of things. Did he make mistakes?
But
Did he continue to make mistakes?
mentioned, yes, don't we all? But it mentioned pretty specifically his only child. So
Only child. I actually had that in my notes, but I didn't want to dive into that. But yeah, there were no other kids for him. This is it. You know, we've been talking about young folks. We did on our adult Bible class. We've been bringing them up quite a bit, the current culture and the generation coming up. Do you ever, when you're out there, see young people making bad choices? We've been talking about that also in our emotions lessons on Sunday night. And when we recognize when people are misusing or not embracing properly their emotions, whatever it might be, and not applying them properly or correctly, and not dealing with them in the proper way, and they're overtaking them, what can we do to help them? Isn't that an uncomfortable situation when you find yourself somebody like you don't maybe not really know very well to try and help them? Or maybe when you see a young person making mistakes and you know it's a mistake, but you know the right course of action. How do you approach that person? How do you help them? I think our younger generation is getting worse and worse. I'm not just saying that because every generation says that about the next generation coming up. It is true. They're making terrible choices. And I'm not saying this is true of all parents, but a lot of parents aren't doing anything to help their kids. The school system is not doing anything to help the children. From what I'm seeing, who can? Who could have helped Jephthah? Well, where was he? Or his community? Or any of those who were around him? But we don't see anyone stepping in to help. It rings so true, those two passages in Judges, that is really the theme of the whole book. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Well, did you hear that vow Jephthah said? Boy, if he only knew Leviticus chapter 27 is an easy way out of that. Somebody should tell him, right? But no one stepped up. No one thought, man, even if they didn't know, we need to try to figure out something we can do. But no one stepped up. How often do we see young people making mistakes and they keep making the same mistake over and over and we just think, man, eventually they're going to learn, and we just watch them. Who's going to help? Their parents surely weren't helping or are helping. School system doesn't seem to be more, they seem to be more interested in gender identity. But who's going to help? That's you and me. We're not here to simply only help one another at North Valley Church of Christ, are we? God's looking to you and me to be a light and to be salt and to step up. That requires us to build relationships. That requires us to have eyes to see and ears to hear. That's why I brought up a couple of weeks ago the passage where the Lord comes and he separates everyone to their left and their right, and he tells them, when you're going to hell because you never fed me, you never clothed me, you never visited me. Well, when did we not do these things? When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. So many are in need. I'm not talking about financial needs. I'm talking about making bad choices in life. They don't know. You do, and I do. And it's up to us. And one day we will go to heaven, and we will stand before God, and he'll ask us, why didn't you help so-and-so? What are you going to say? You know, there was one time where you were over here. I put you in this person's life at that time, at such a moment as that, because you knew the right path. I strive to try to help as many people as I can. I'm not boasting, but I am saying that because I'm scared about what God will say to me that day. Or one day. And I know I've missed many opportunities, but I don't want to miss them anymore. When I read passages like Jephthah, I think about it. When I read about the prodigal son, and I look at him, and I look at Jephthah, and I wonder, have I run into someone, or do I know somebody in that situation? And I just sit back thinking, boy, I wish I could talk to that person. I wish there were some words I could say. You know, I may not know the right words, but I know passages in the Bible I could send them. Maybe even just a simple text, and I've done that. Send a text, hey, read this. And I'm just curious about what your thoughts are on this. Maybe you can help me out understanding something. And that's just a sly way to get them to read and think about things in the Bible. Maybe we could do that. But these stories are here in the book of Judges for a reason. What is the culture like in Israel right here in chapters 10 and 11 of Judges? What's the culture like? It's real bad. What are people doing to help? As we were working through the book of Ruth and her husband, and there was a famine, what did he decide was the best thing to do? Leave the promised land and go somewhere else. As we were saying, doesn't he know what God has said? Is he not thinking through the law, the blessings and cursings? He's not thinking it through. He should have inquired of the Lord. Maybe we need to do more of that in our prayers about what we ought to be doing and the people we are coming in contact with. And we come in contact with a lot of people all the time. And looking the way that our country is going right now, I think people have no idea what's going on. There is so much division, there is so much strife, and so many bad choices being made out there in our world. Who knows the right way to go? Well, it's not you and me, but God does. And we can help people to find it, can't we? So when we read our Bibles, we read over passages like this, where we read about people who make bad decisions, and we sometimes will just shake our head. We run into those same people all the time. Wouldn't you like it if you were making a bad decision for somebody to come along and let you know? Like I think we mentioned this also in the past, where wouldn't it be nice to be able to go back and do things over? If you could keep everything you know now, all your experience, and go back and start again, would you do it differently? Man, yeah, I know a lot of things I'd do it differently. Because I made a lot of mistakes. So there's a lot of people out there making a lot of mistakes. And there's very few leaders. We see a lot of people going around in homes, maybe even in congregations, thinking, boy, we need someone to lead us. Where are we going to go? Well, we're here. We could, not necessarily their lives, but we could point them in the right direction of the leader that can take them where they need to go. Point them to Jesus. You know it, and I know it. We just have to make the decision to do it. I want us to think about that this week. I want us to pray about that, because that is forefront of my mind. I'm sure you see these things as well. We can see it in the story of Judges, and we can see it in the lives all around us.